The 1970s had various ultimate CanCon movies. When I say about CanCon, where the cast is mostly Canadian and the crew is mostly Canadian, this was considered one of the top Canadian movies, box office wise and critical wise, of the 1970s. We have to mention it because every Christmas it's a favorite with my friends and family. And this is another request for a good follower of the channel, Andrew Limpert. Black Christmas. Almost 50 years of age. It came out in 1974. It was originally titled Silent Night, Evil Night in the United States and retitled Stranger in a House on TV screenings. It's a 1974 Canadian slasher film produced and directed by Bob Clark of A Christmas Story fame and written by Roy Moore. It stars Olivia Hussey, Romeo and Juliet, of course, Keir Dullea of 2001: A Space Odyssey, Margot Kidder of Superman fame, and of course the great John Saxon. The story follows a group of sorority sisters who receive threatening phone calls and eventually stalked and murdered by a deranged killer during the Christmas season. Now, inspired by the urban legend The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs and a series of murders that took place in the Westmount neighborhood of Montreal, Moore wrote the screenplay under the title Stop Me. The filmmakers made numerous alterations to the script, primarily the shifting to a university setting with young adult characters. It was shot in Toronto in 1974 at an estimated budget of $686,000, or about $1 million American, and it was distributed by Warner Brothers in North America. Upon its release, Black Christmas received mixed reviews, but has since been received critical reappraisal, with film historians noting it for being one of the earliest slasher films. It also praised for its influence on John Carpenter's Halloween. Aside from earning a cult following since its release, a novelization written by Lee Hayes was published in 1976. It is the first film in the Black Christmas series, being followed by two remakes in 2006 and 2019. Please avoid them. Now, this is part of the Canadian Film Development Corporation, Famous Players, Vision 4, and Film Funding Limited. 98 minutes, and again, double the box office, but on video release and TV release is done quite well. And it's being shown on Hollywood Suite in Canada this month. Now, this one, an unseen man climbs the exterior of a sorority house where a Christmas party is being held and enters the attic. The house phone then rings, and sorority sister Jess Bradford answers to discover it is an obscene phone call from a person who was called before, whom the sorority nicknamed the Moaner. Jess and the other sorority members listen as the caller rants and screams in strange voices before abruptly threatening to kill them. Upset by the call, a younger student named Claire Harrison decides to leave and goes upstairs to a bedroom to pack her suitcase. There, unbeknownst to the rest of the sorority, Claire is attacked by the killer, hiding in her closet, and murdered. The following morning, Claire's father arrives, saying that Claire failed to meet up with him at a train station. House mother Mrs. McHenry offers to help Mr. Harrison look for her. Later that day, Jess informs her boyfriend Peter that she is pregnant and plans to undergo an abortion, much to his disapproval. Meanwhile, Harrison and two other sorority members, Barb and Phil, attempt to report Claire's disappearance to Sergeant Nash, who does not take them seriously at first until Chris Hayden, Claire's boyfriend, barges in angrily later in the day and demands something be done about it. A search party is held at night for Claire, in which Harrison, Chris, and most of the sorority get involved. Meanwhile, McHenry discovers Claire's body in the attic before the killer murders her with a crane hook. Shortly after, Jess answers another obscene phone call and decides to file a report with the police. Shortly after, Lieutenant Fuller arrives with a telephone lineman to tap the phone so that the police can determine the identity of the harasser. After Fuller leaves, a group of Christmas carolers appear at the front door. As Jess watches the singers, the killer sneaks into Barb's room and stabs her to death with a glass unicorn figurine, with her cries for help being drowned out by the carolers. Jess then receives another obscene phone call, in which the caller emulates parts of an earlier argument she had with Peter. Lieutenant Fuller calls her to say the attempt to trace the call failed, and they both begin placing suspicions towards Peter. Jess and Phil decide to lock up every door and window in the house. Shortly after, however, Phil is murdered by the killer after finding Barb's body. Now, Jess receives yet another obscene phone call, which is successfully traced by the police. Sergeant Nass instructs Jess to leave the house immediately as the calls are coming from inside the house. Jess goes to alert Barb and Phil, only to discover them dead. Jess sees the killer's eyes staring at her through a door crack before she slams the door against him and flees. The killer chases after her, and unable to open the front door, Jess runs into the basement. locking it behind her. Shortly after, though, Peter breaks through the basement window and slowly approaches Jess as he wordily asks if she is okay. In a state of panic, Jess beats Peter to death with a fire poker, and the police find her barely conscious as she cradles Peter's body. Believing that Peter was the killer, the police put Jess to bed and leave her alone in the bedroom with a police officer standing outside. However, the killer's voice is heard from the attic, and a shadow is seen descending the attic's ladder before the house telephone begins to ring, implying the killer had murdered Jess. Now, Olivia Hussey plays Jess, Keir Delay as Peter, Marco Kidder as Barb, again John Saxon, Lieutenant Fuller, Marion Waldman as Mrs. McHenry, Andrea Martin of SCT fame as Phil, James Edmund as Mr. Harrison, the great Doug McGrath as Sergeant Nash, Art Hindle as Chris, Lynn Griffin as Claire, Michael Rapport as Patrick, Les Carlson as Bill, Martha Gibson and Mrs. Quifey, John Rutter as the Laughing Detective, Dave Clement as Cogan, Julian Reed as Officer Jennings, Nick Mancuso as Billy the phone voice, very great Canadian actor, Bob Clark as Billy's Shadow and the phone voice uncredited, and Albert J. Dunk as Billy's point of view uncredited. Now, Black Christmas was initially developed by Canadian screenwriter Roy Moore, who wrote the screenplay under the title Stopping. Inspirations for the film came from the urban legend, again known as The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs, which has become widespread in the 1970s. Moore claimed to have been inspired by a series of murders that occurred during the holiday season in Westmount area of Montreal. As noted in an article for The Telegraph, the murders, which occurred in 1943, were perpetrated by a 14-year-old boy who bludgeoned several of his family members to death. Film producers Harvey Sherman and Richard Schutten had Timothy Bond rewrite the script to give it a university setting. Director and producer Bob Clark, who had felt the original script was too much of a straightforward slasher film, made several alterations in dialogue and also incorporated humorous elements in the film, particularly the drunkenness of Barb and Mrs. Mack, the latter of whom Clark based on his aunt. Clark felt that college and high school students had not been depicted with any sense of reality in American film, and that he intended to capture the astuteness of young athletes. College students, even in 1974, are astute people. They're not fools. It's not all bikinis, beach blankets, and bingo. Now, again, the film was shot from March to May 1974, with $200,000 coming from the Canadian Film Development Corporation at the University of Toronto campus. According to Saxon, Clark had meticulously drawn out storyboards with key shots, which he brought to the film each set day. Now, scenes in the film involving POV shots of Billy Skilney House was accomplished through the use of a rig designed by camera operator Bert Dunk. Now, Margot Kidder will remember shooting the film as being fun. I really bonded with Andrea Martin filming in Toronto and Ontario. Hussey was a bit of an odd one. She was obsessed with the idea of falling in love with Paul McCartney through her psychic. We were lit our heart on her for things like that. Now, Black Christmas was distributed in Canada by Ambassador Film Distributors and released in Toronto on October 11, 1974. The film grossed $143,000 from 9 theaters in Toronto its first 2 weeks and earned $1.3 million during its theatrical run in Canada. Warner Brothers believed that the film would earn at least $7 million in the States. When the film was released on the 20th of December, it only earned $284,000 during its theatrical run due to competition from The Godfather Part 2 and The Man with the Golden Gun. For its American release, the film was retitled to Silent Night, Evil Night due to fears the original title would mislead audiences in believing the film was a blaxploitation movie. They retracted the title after initial release, restoring it to Black Christmas for subsequent screenings. Now, Warner Brothers re-released the film in LA in August 1975, and it earned $86,000 in 1 week. Its big screen run was extended to 19 theaters, and the film's successful run in LA and Chicago resulted in Warner Brothers expanding the film to 70 theaters for Halloween. However, the film only made $354,000 for those theaters, worth $700 per theater per day, causing 58 of the locations to cancel their bookings. The film ended its theatrical run in December after making less than $1 million that year. Now, this at the time was the third highest grossing Canadian film in Canada, with $2 million behind The Apprenticeship of Dudley Kravitz with Dustin Hoffman and the French language De Femme en Or, directed by the great Claude Fournier. Now, the film had big controversy when it was supposed to appear on TV. It was supposed to be shown on NBC under the title Stranger in the House, on January 28, 78 on NBC's weekly Saturday Night at the Movies. 2 weeks prior to his premiere, the Chi Omega sorority house on the campus of Florida State in Tallahassee was the scene of a double murder in which two Omega sisters, asleep in their beds, were bludgeoned to death. The killer was Ted Bundy. The killer then went to a nearby room in the sorority house and violently attacked two more sleeping students who survived. Again, the Bundy murder led to him being executed on January 24th, 89. A few days before the film was set to premiere on network TV, Florida's then Governor Ruben Askew contacted NBC President Robert Mulholland to request the movie not be shown due to his all too similar theme in the murders of sorority sisters by an unknown madman at the sorority house. On Tuesday, January 24th, NBC TV gave several of its affiliates in Florida and Alabama the option of showing an alternate film, Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze, in place of Stranger in the House. The report revealed that the network said in a statement issued yesterday in New York City that was responding to concern voiced by the affiliates because of the murder of two co-eds this month in a sorority house at Florida State in Tallahassee. Now, during its initial release, the film had garnered mixed reviews. The New York Times called it a whodunit that raises the question as to why was it made. Variety called the film a bloody, senseless, kill-for-kicks feature. Gene Siskel hated it, giving the film 1.5 stars out of 4, and called it a routine shocker that is notable only for indicating the kind of junk roles that talented actresses are forced to play in the movies. Kevin Thomas of the LA Times wrote, before it manically overreaches in a gratuitously evasive ending, Black Christmas is a smart, stylish, Canadian-made little horror picture that is completely diverting. It may well be that a maker simply couldn't figure out how to end it. Now, later reviews have been more positive. On Rotten Tomatoes, Black Christmas holds an approval rating of 72% based on 36 reviews, with an average rating of 6.4. The website critics' consensus reads, the rare slasher with enough intelligence to wind up the tension between bloody outbursts. Black Christmas offers fiendishly enjoyable holiday viewing for genre fans. Now, Black Christmas has been released on DVD several times in North America. The 25th anniversary edition was released in Canada on November 6, 2001 by Critical Mass. This edition only contains the theatrical trailer as a bonus feature. The following year, on December 3rd, 2002, Critical Mass released a collector's edition of film on DVD with making of documentaries, 2 audio commentary tracks, and reversible English and French cover artwork. On December 5th, 2006, Critical Mass released a 3rd special edition DVD with a newly remastered transfer, 2 original scenes with newly uncovered vocal tracks, a new documentary, and cast and film crew interviews. This edition was later released on Blu-ray on November 11, 2008. Now, Anchor Bay released a Blu-ray and DVD in Canada titled The Season's Grievings Edition. Contains the same transfer to film in a special edition, but came out in the mid-2010s. Now, in the United States, Scream Factory released the film in a collector's edition Blu-ray in 2016 with a new transfer and new extras. Now, unlike the previous home media releases and like the 86 US VHS release from Warner, the collector's edition 4K, Ultra HD, and Blu-ray release featured a Warner Brothers logo at the beginning and the end of the film. Now, several nominations here. Nominated for Best Horror Film at the Saturn Awards, Canadian Film Awards. It won Best Sound Editing in 75 and Best Performance by Lead Actress for Margot Kidder, and a nominee for Best Feature Film. And the Edgar Allan Poe Awards was nominated for Best Motion Picture, A. Roy Moore nominated. Now, like I said, the movie got a cult following and is notable for being one of the early slasher films. It went on to inspire numerous films, including Halloween. Now, it was included in multiple lists in various media outlets. It was one of the greatest horror films ever made, as high as number 67 in IndieWire's Top 100. Paul Schroth of Esquire placed it at number 23, and the Complex magazine named Black Christmas the second best slasher film of all time. Pace gave it top 3, and Jess Bradford was also called number 1 on their list of 20 best final girls in horror movie history. Now, Hussey once told Bravo during an interview about their 100 Scariest Movies series that when she met Steve Martin for the first time, he told her that she starred in one of his favorite films of all time. She initially thought he was referring to Romeo and Juliet, but was surprised when Martin said it was Black Christmas and that he had seen the film 27 times. Now, the novelization of the film, written by Hayes, was published in 76 by Popular Library. The book follows roughly the same plot, but sticks with Roy Moore's original script. Because of this, the novel ends up fleshing out the characters more, adding scenes and lines of dialogue that were initially cut for the film's final script, and giving the Pi Kappa Sigma property more backstory. And again, the remakes are terrible. I would just avoid them as all possible. But Andre Martin did come back for one of them. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a while since I'm bleeding Black Christmas. But from a CanCon standpoint, it's got to be 5 out of 5 because you got an SCTV cast member, you got Margot Kidder, you got Art Hindle, you got Nick Mancuso, you Keir Delay, probably one of the worst actors in Canadian history in the best movies. But Olivia Hussey, she took that lawsuit about Romeo and Juliet recently. Maybe she took a lawsuit against the makers of this film for victimizing her. Maybe the Canadian government will be sued because we paid for the movie. It's our tax dollars that was part of the Canadian Film Development Corporation. Again, in that era, a top 10 CanCon movie of the 1970s, no doubt. And if you don't like slasher movies, don't see it. But if you do, give it a try. But Canadian horror movies are still very popular. And don't forget the early 1980 Canadian horror movies still are a bunch of cheese. So thanks for listening. If you like what you're doing here with our CanCon podcast, again, Andrew Lippert made the request. Thank you, Andrew. Happy holidays to everybody. And don't forget, just because you're listening to this doesn't mean you support movies like this. But I'm giving you a history of movies you may not want even to see, but I'm giving you a background as to why they're important. And this in Canadian movie history was significant. There was no horror genre in Canada even 5 years before, but the 70s and early 80s, including The Silent Partner, and even that shitty John Candy movie, The Clown Murders, we became perfections of what he called the B-level horror movie with color. Thanks for listening. Bye.